Hey everybody, what is going on? Hexlex here. I got another Master Duel video for you. So, coming at you with another branded Despia profile for this season. For my list, I decided to turn over to Untapped and just see what branded Despia lists were doing well win rate wise, if I can say that 5 times fast, wow, that I could also feasibly build. Of course, I could feasibly build just about any branded Despia build with my UR count, I know, but this is a deck that I play super often, so it's not one I'm really looking to invest a lot of resources in necessarily. But I do think that there is at least one investment that I'm probably just about to make here for future deck profiles at this point. Is just finally crafting the Borload Furious Dragon. I think both this card and the Deer Servant are the big URs that I'm not playing in this build. And so when I was looking at lists on Untapped, I wanted to find one that wasn't using the Deer Servant. So I found one that wasn't, but it was still playing the Borload Furious. I do think this probably is just a staple. And I'd probably take out either Mud Dragon or Sprint for Borload Furious if I was like very serious about playing branded Despia. Again, it's not that I dislike this deck, I just, I have so many decks that I like to play that there are quite a few that end up taking precedence for me over branded Despia. Now, I've noticed when it comes to Nadir Servant, which is another UR card typically played in this deck that I don't own, that this one, I don't know if it's I don't know if it's like largely because they're tournament builds or largely because the card is actually not super great anymore, but I've just been noticing that this card is falling off a little bit. Again, particularly in tournament builds, even though I've been using Untapped a lot, I'll still go over to Master Duel meta and do the filter by tournament mode to look at tournament decks. And I notice over on Master Duel meta, it's like Nadir Servant, it seems to be dropping off pretty hard in branded Despia decks, but again, over on Untapped, when I was sorting by win rate in like Diamond and Master, a lot of the branded Despia decks with the highest win rate were still on Nadir Servant. So I think this list that I found, and I did make some tweaks to it as well, I think it had about like a 63 and some change % win rate, but I remember seeing a branded Despia build that within Master Rank alone had played 50 games and had like an 82% win rate, which like, that's insane, by the way. That's an insanely high win rate. 82% in Master. Like, that's wild. That's almost a straight shot from Master 5 to Master 1. So that definitely it's experiencing a lot of success. So again, maybe it's a case where the Deer Servant just ends up being better in ladder builds than tournament builds for one reason or another. Maybe the people who aren't on the Deer Servant are just like me and just don't own it. That is always a factor to consider when it comes to UR cards. So I think after playing with branded Despia a little bit this season, my current consensus is that Nadir Servant, I don't necessarily personally feel like I have to be playing it. But again, the Borload Furious Dragon, I'm at a point where I think I am, even as a not often branded Despia player, probably just about to craft this for my next deck profile. But for this one, I wasn't on it, so I haven't crafted it just yet. I was on the list that you're seeing here. There are a few things that I would change about this list, I think. One of the big ones is Harpy's Feather Duster. I don't know if I like this card, actually, in this meta, for Ranked Ladder in particular, because Snake Eyes is everywhere. Again, if you go to Untapped and you sort by Diamond and Master, Snake Eye makes up, at the time of recording this, last I checked, 23.8% of decks in Diamond and Master ladders. So you can definitely plan to be matching up against that deck a fair bit. And I can tell you, playing in those ranks this season, that is definitely accurate. There are a ton of Snake Eyes decks out there. And Feather Duster ends up not being that great a lot of the time against Snake Eyes. Not because they don't have back rows to hit, but funnily enough, because they have a back row you don't want to hit, and that's their own Snake Eyes Flambridge Dragon. I had at least one, but I think even a couple of games where, I had the Feather Duster, but they had the Flambridge in the back row, and I was just kind of thinking, I wish this was evenly. Now, I know, a lot of you are like, well, Hex, you said you don't like playing evenly matched in Best of 1 Ranked Ladder. Those kinds of cards I am more apt to play if I have a reason to, besides just simply the question, what if I go second? And its triple tactics thrust would be the reason, right? And again, I'm talking about playing one single evenly, not even like a full playset, right? But having the ability to set evenly off of thrust is really good. Not just, well, even set it, yeah. Because, you know, obviously if it was turn 2, you would add it to hand and activate it. But with thrust, you can actually set evenly turn 1 in theory, and then just pass with that being the only card on your field. So thrust does make evenly a lot more accessible when going first. And for that reason, I would definitely not mind playing it evenly over a Feather Duster. I definitely would want to make that change moving forward. Also, Branded Banishment wasn't in this list, and I didn't even really realize it until after I'd played the game. So, Branded Sword, while a good card to mill/discard, and is very, very good in that regard, I think the Branded Banishment probably ends up being better. The main change that I made for the main deck that was different from the list that I copied was, again, they were on Boarload Furious, and I don't own it, so I decided to play Guardian Chimera, and of course, because I was doing that, I needed to play Branded in red as well. Also, they were on 2 Granganol, so I played a Sprint. I opted for a Sprint instead. Oh, and also I'm playing Coritis over Proskinian. Obviously, I own a Proskinian, it's a rare card, but I'd be lying if I said the Royal Coritis was not my main incentive to play this instead. But I will say, I do really, really like that Coritis has multiple ways to disrupt the opponent on their turn, right? The attack drop effect can often be really relevant, especially because the attack drop effect will often force them to remove this via card effect, which will then proc this to summon out Albaz and then fuse with their stuff and so on and so forth. 3 Albion and 3 Lubellion. I loved this. I loved it a lot. Especially the 3 Albion just makes accessing the Branded Fusion so much easier, especially with the 2 Branded Retribution as well. There's a lot about this list I do like as far as like what we're mainly doing with the engine and how we're establishing it. It's just a lot of the minor, like just again, very minor things that I would tweak. And again, like I said, if I was serious about playing Branded Despia, would 100% be playing the Boarload Furious Dragon as well. Let's see. The other thing I was kind of thinking about, as I have been doing with a lot of builds lately, is rather than playing 3 Droll and Lockbird, play 2 Droll and Lockbird and 1 Nibiru. The problem is Nibiru, again, if we're thinking about Snake Eyes being in the meta, isn't really that great against them. But the thing is, Droll isn't either. So if we are, again, well, here's the thing, right? Like, Snake Eyes might make up 25% of the meta, but that's still 3 out of 4 games that you're playing in Diamond and Masters not going to be against Snake Eye. So it's always a fine tightrope kind of, you know, that you walk, right? You have to think about, like, of course, it's correct to plan for the matchups that you anticipate to see the most, but that can't be the only matchup you plan for. So, you know, thinking about Droll and Lockbird, while it's not very good against, like, you know, this deck or, like, the mirror match, I mean, Branded Despia, or Snake Eye, it still has application against Monadium or Super Heavy Samurai. That said, and this is probably just a completely personal experience thing, I have not seen Monadium or Super Heavy Samurai, like, at all since the new selection pack dropped in Upper Diamond and Master. It's kind of wild. I think I have played against Monadium a couple of times, but, like, Super Heavy Samurai, that one is not an exaggeration. I literally have not seen a single Super Heavy Samurai, even before the selection pack dropped. It's been a hot minute, maybe even this season. I don't quite remember before the pack dropped, but definitely since the pack dropped, I've not seen a single one. So, I don't know, that doesn't mean Droll, like, let's cut all the Drolls out of every deck, but at the same time, it is definitely worth considering that maybe it's better to play. I don't know, it's like, you know, I'm thinking about, like, Imperm, but I feel like Imperm is kind of awkward in a 60-card deck like this one especially. Who knows? We'll figure it out. Again, I'm also not a dedicated enough Branded player to fully be able to suss out all the tech ratios and what is feasible necessarily. Oh, I will say, against Snake Eye, the bestial monsters are a lot better than they might look for being able to banish the IP Masquerena out of the graveyard when they go to target it with the Flambird Dragon. That's actually pretty huge and stops a lot of their disruption. I even had one Snake Eye player in particular. I did it against multiple Snake Eye players and won a lot of times I did it. One player in particular even just snap conceded as soon as I bestial their IP. They were just like, nope, I'm done. So that's a very, very powerful play, but another thing to consider in that particular matchup. In any case, I think I'm just going to go ahead and break this list down card by card, and then we'll see the handful of games that I have picked out for us for this deck. So we are on a 3 Droll Mockbird, 1 Despian Tragedy, 3 Maxi, 3 Ash Blossom and a Joyous Spring, 3 Fallen of Albaz, 2 Alibur, the Jester of Despia, 1 Tri-Brigade Mercurier, 1 Springin's Kit, 2 Blazing Cartesia, the Virtuous, 2 Guiding Quem, the Virtuous, 1 Bestial Magnum Hunt, 1 Bestial Sarnier, 1 Bestial Druisworm, 3 Albion the Shrouded Dragon, 3 the Bestial Lubellion, 1 Harpies Feather Duster, 1 Foolish Burial, 1 Golden Sarcophagus, 1 That Grass Looks Greener, 3 Fusion Deployment, 1 Triple Tactics Talent, 1 Branded in White, 1 Branded Fusion, 3 Triple Tactics Thrust, 1 Branded Lost, 1 Branded Regain, 3 Super Polymerization, 2 Call by the Grave, 1 Cross-Eye Designator, 2 Branded Opening, 1 Branded in High Spirits, 1 Branded in Red, 1 Branded Sword, 1 Fusion Duplication, 2 Branded Retribution, and then finally 1 Branded Beast, and that's going to be our 60-card main deck. For the extra deck, we're on 1 Mud Dragon of the Swamp, 1 Garura, Wings of Restorant Life, 1 Predaplant, Dragostapelia, 1 Titaniclad, the Ash Dragon, 1 Sprin to the Iron Dash Dragon, 2 Albion, the Branded Dragon, 1 Despian Coritis, 1 Mirror Jade, the Ice White Dragon, 1 Lubellion, the Searing Dragon, 1 Granganol, the Dusk Dragon, 1 Rindrum, the Striking Dragon, 1 Albion, the Sanctifier Dragon. Good God, how many dragons does this deck need? 1 Guardian Chimera, and then 1 Predaplant, Vert, Anaconda. That's going to do it for the list. Let's go ahead and see these games. Alright, our first opponent is going to be on Stun. Now, this is going to be a fairly short game, relatively speaking. I might not normally show a duel like this, but I thought that this was a good example of showing how you can do a lot of hand building, or hand sculpting, is kind of a phrase I like to call it, with Branded, and also why I really like playing 3 of each of these cards to be able to open them. Hand sculpting is a phrase that basically means, like, you start with a hand that might not look very impressive or great, but through use of various effects, you can actually turn it into something that can play a lot better. So, especially somebody who's, like, not very well experienced with Branded Despia, right, you might look at a hand like this and think, like, oh, this hand looks so dead. Like, what can I actually do with a hand like this? There's no Alibur, there's no Branded Fusion, there's no Quem. Like, what can a hand like this possibly accomplish? This is actually a full setup. This is a full setup, and I'm going to show you how. So I'm going to start with the Lubellion effect in order to add the Sarnier. I wanted to be mindful playing around draw whether I use Lubellion or Albion first. I figured I kind of hedged here and decided that if my opponent has a Droll, it was better to Lubellion for a Bestial as potential disruption rather than Albion into a random card, right? But thankfully no Droll here, so I am going to use Albion to send the Branded Retribution. We even drew the Tri-Brigade Mercurier, which is a phenomenally good draw. This will represent Monster Effect Negation a little bit later, but I wanted to set up the Branded Retribution in the graveyard. Basically, what I'm planning to do is also send the Branded Fusion and then add both of them. But the reason that I sent Retribution first is, and I know we're playing a 60-card deck, so this is a long shot, but there is a world where I top deck Branded Fusion if I don't mill it. So I don't want to mill it for that reason. But anyway, I'm going to use Cartesia and then summon her, rather, and then fuse her with the Sarnier that I just added to summon out the Granganol. This will proc both Sarnier and Granganol's effects. I actually want to chain block Sarnier because that's the more important effect to me. I want to send the Branded Fusion to the yard with the Sarnier to be able to pick it up later. Also with Granganol, I am sending the Titaniclad. The reason I sent Titaniclad, and because you might be thinking, well, Hex, wouldn't you want to send the Albion? Because that's going to be, you know, the best end phase search effect that you have. And while that is true, I'm already planning on summoning Albion and sending it to the graveyard later this turn. So for that reason, I'm going to send Titaniclad now to have access to a Dogmatica monster. Now, you might also be thinking, but Hex, you don't play any Dogmatica monsters. But thankfully, Guiding Quem always counts as one. So, alright, there goes the Branded Fusion. Now I get to use the Retribution to bounce the Fusion back to my hand from the graveyard. And we can pop that off here, sending Albaz and Lubellion for the Fusion Albion. Now, it could be Albaz and any other light. I already had another Lubellion in my graveyard, so I didn't have to send Lubellion here. But it's like, the next best target is Cartesia, which I also already have another one in my graveyard anyway. I think another one of the best next targets, what else is like? Quem? But I'm already gonna summon Quem off of Titaniclad anyway as well, so it's like, I don't know. I figured at this point it didn't super matter which light I set, so I just sent it to the Lubellion here, but I'm going to use Albion to fuse the Albaz and Saronir in my graveyard for Fusion Lubellion. I'm doing this because I want to keep Albion on the field, and also because I have that branded sword in my hand that I can discard, but mainly to keep the Albion on the field. Now I can go into Mirror Jade with the Lubellion, and now I can sack Fusion Albion for effect Lubellion. Why do these monsters all have the same goddamn 2 names? That's always bothered me about this archetype. I understand thematically why, but when it comes to actually talking about this deck, that can make it really awkward sometimes. But anyway. So yeah, again, using the Lubellion there so we can keep Albion on the field, send it for the Lubellion, and that's also why I sent Titaniclad and not Albion earlier, is because, again, like I said, I was always going to put Albion in the graveyard at some point anyway. Alright, now I'm going to use the Lubellion in order to set up the Branded Lost. It might seem a little weird to set this up and not the Branded Regained, but if you look at my graveyard, I don't really have any bestial monsters I can summon off of Regained anyway, but I can, however, fusion summon during my opponent's turn, potentially. So with the Albion here, I end up setting the Retribution. I could have set Branded in red, but the thing about Branded in red is I don't really have an Albaz or a Despia monster in my yard. I would have set Branded Banishment if I was playing it, because I could have actually summoned the Fusion Albion in my yard, because I did properly Fusion summon it. I didn't just directly send it off of, like, Mirror Jade or Granganol or something. But in this situation, I'll just set the Retribution. Titaniclad gets summoned Quem, and then as you can see, my opponent decided to not even want to play through this. So... yeah, like I said, I normally don't show duels like this. I normally don't show one-turn games, but I felt like this was still a good game to show, especially for somebody who might be newer to Branded Despia and might not see how hands like that, like, you might look at the deck list and be like, you have so few ways to search Branded Fusion, how are you actually supposed to do it? And you might see a hand like that and think, well, you didn't even open Alibur, like, what are you supposed to do here? But this deck does not live and die by Alibur, like the 40 card, like, you know, the old 40 card Branded Despia list when Alibur and Branded Fusion were both at 3, like, yeah, you were just gonna try to draw one of those 2 cards and then combo off, but we're definitely long past those days, not only because those cards are hit on the list, but also because we have a lot more ways to access our resources. So we're gonna see a couple more games here. These are gonna be more than one turn, I promise. Let's look at the next duel. Alright, this next duel is going to be against Snake Eye Rescue Ace. I haven't tried this deck yet myself, and I don't even think I've played against it that much, but we'll be taking the second turn here. Hand's looking not bad. This hand would be phenomenal going first, jeez, but... And of course we didn't we didn't draw a Droll to punish this person not using the Wanted during the draw phase, but you know what, it's all good. We do have the Saronir, and as I touched on earlier, Saronir, the Bestials in general, can actually be a lot better against Snake Eye than you might expect them to be. Again, for the ability to banish the IP out of the graveyard when they go to target it with the Flamberge Dragon is huge. That stops a lot of their disruption. Because not only does it stop them from going into like Appaloosa or Nightmare Unicorn or something on their turn, but it also prevents them from sending the Flamberge Dragon during your turn, which means they don't get to summon Ash and Oak and get the advantage off of that. It in a lot of ways, like, very much limits what they can do. Now here, I don't really know what happened here. I'm not gonna lie, because, like, what happened here? What happened to this combo, like? Because I feel like this happened when I was actually playing this game too, you know? My opponent resolved the Diabell Star, and I was like, okay, I guess I'll use the Saronir whenever they put IP in the yard. And I feel like I looked down and looked back up, and their board looked like this. So let me actually see, excuse me, where they misplayed here. So, okay, we set the original Sin, special to Ash, added and summoned to Poplar, activated to add another one of these. I guess we weren't on the field spell. We should have added that. Activating the Wanted here. This person might just be, like, brand new to this deck, because this is something that I did a lot too. Right when I first started, is like using the Wanted right away. Okay, we activated Ash and sent Poplar Oh, we sent them both from the field. I see. We didn't link into Linkaribo. We didn't go for Oak first. We went straight for the Flamberge. Oh, and then we tried to... We tributed Flamberge with only one level 1 fire monster in the graveyard, too. Yeah, that was pretty brutal. I won't lie. That was not the best, unfortunately. But yeah, I'll end phase Sarnir, and because I'm just the best player in the world, I guess I'm just gonna peel the Branded Fusion off the top of my deck. So I think with that player, I mean, that player could have had a full Snake Eye combo. In addition to also setting up the Hydrant with the original Sin, and if they had, well, yeah, because they just discarded Airlifter. I guess I don't know if they had Airlifter before, but. Excuse me, but with this number of Snake Eye, or Rescue Ace cards, and Snake Eye cards, they should have had a full combo here, I think. Now, the interesting thing about my hand is I think I actually had a real chance, especially top decking Branded Fusion, to actually play through a full board. I kind of wish I would have had the opportunity in this game in particular, but I don't know, the Snake Eye games are so, like, they're so... I don't know, it's definitely one of those decks that I've noticed a lot more so than other Master Duel decks that people are, like, making misplays on. And I think the reason is because, you know, we're just getting popular in the TCG, like, at the same time as we got it in Master Duel. Like, overall, the experience with Snake Eye in Master Duel is lower than a lot of other decks on release in Master Duel, because a lot of other decks in release have been out in paper in both TCG and OCG for, you know, typically at least like 3 months, but even usually, you know, somewhere in the neighborhood of like closer to 6. So, yeah, I think when it comes to Snake Eye, we're all kind of like learning at the same time. So, and you know, in general, I also don't fault people for, like, I was gonna say misplaying with a newer deck, but I mean, really just misplaying in general. I think a lot of the time, you know, the Yu-Gi-Oh community is so harsh about misplaying. Now, granted, like, I think we can objectively say that our opponent fumbled the combo line pretty hard, but, you know, that's not me saying that, like, oh, our opponent was so bad. I hear that a lot. I hear, like, oh, you misplayed, therefore you're bad. And it's like, no, they're probably just learning. It's like, I don't know. This is one thing. I want to get on my soapbox here for just a second before we move on to the next game. A lot of people say that Yu-Gi-Oh! Is an unfriendly experience to new players because of Konami, like, because the game is so mechanically complex, the Konami doesn't do the best job of introducing players, and there's an element of that. But you also see so many players out here, like, just shit-talking and dogging on people for making misplays, and it's like, you know, like, how do you know this? How do you know this isn't this person's first game with this deck? How do you know this isn't this person's first game, like, on Master Duel Ranked ladder? Like, it's so easy to pop into a Duel Life and be like, oh, look at how awful these players are. And it's like, I kind of can't help but wonder if that is also not a contributing factor to new players not wanting to play Yu-Gi-Oh! Like, I've known someone who's had that experience, who, like, has been interested in Yu-Gi-Oh! Competitively, but turned off by the community and not gotten into it as a result. That happens, and I think to say that it's only Konami's fault is a little disingenuous in that regard. But, I don't know. I'm always just going on about how we as a community can do better. Anyway, I'm going to get off my soapbox now, and we're going to take a look at this last duel. Okay, our last game for this video is going to be against another Snake Eye player. They're taking a small Kashira engine, I noticed. I saw Fenrir, Unicorn, I think Birth as well, if I remember right. So, alright, we're going to be going first. And this hand, not the best in the world, but, you know, if nothing else, I can Fusion Deployment out a Cortesia and potentially use it as a Super Poly target. Along with, yeah, I'll set this Call By for Disruption as well. Not setting the Branded Sword because I want to discard it, right? Alright, so they're sending the Sylvar for the Diabell Star, setting up the original Sinful Spoils. So I decided to use Super Poly here for a couple of reasons. The main reason was to summon Granganol while I had the opportunity to, because I wasn't sure. Like, I did kind of assume I was playing in Snake Eye, but with Diabell Star, you can never be super certain exactly what deck. It's kind of like Kashira Fenrir was when it first came out, right? Like, if they specialed Fenrir, they were probably on Cash, but they could also very easily not be. The same is true of Diabell Star here. So, I don't know. Against Snake Eye, like, I am thinking about potentially using Super Poly against a couple of their Snake Eye monsters, like their Ash and Oak, to make Garura and stop them that way. However, I'm also thinking about making Granganol and using that to potentially summon Coritis. And if I want to do it that way, I'm going to need to fuse Cortesia with a Dark. The other thing about fusing away the Diabell Star now is that I know they have original Sinful Spoil set. So now I force them to use a normal summon. In order to make that original Sinful Spoils live, which could very easily stop a lot of their line, and depending on their hand, might even stop their turn. So this was a hedge. I think no matter when you Super Poly, honestly, in this situation, it's going to be a hedge, but I think this was the better call, honestly. Okay, they are going to Ash Blossom the Granganol effect to send, which is a little annoying, but honestly not like that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things. Alright, normal summon effect Veiler, sending it off the Sinful. So yeah, they did have another card to send. Alright, so now they're going for like the combo line here, right? They have procs the Ash, Popular Effect is activating. I'm going to use Granganol here to summon out the Coritis, though. Because like I said, I feel like the Coritis has more disruption than the Perskinian does. I mean, to be fair, the Perskinian could pull the IP out of the graveyard, I guess, but... Or I guess maybe the Link Reaper... Well, the Link Reaper can change its own effect if they have a level 1 monster. I don't know, it's just like... I feel like I could see arguments for both, honestly. But I have Royal Coritis. So like I said, that's gonna be the, that'll be the tiebreaker there for me. Now, thankfully, I do get to use the Called By here against the Flamberge Dragon, which this is pretty huge for a couple of reasons. Not only do I get to stop this effect to summon out a couple level 1 monsters, this also keeps the one that's on the field from pushing my Coritis into the spell trap zone. So now they're in a little bit of a bind. There's not really a whole lot they can do in this situation. Still going for the IP, and then I think it's Promethean Princess, and then climbing up to the Ambler Whale. Yeah, that's pretty much what's going to happen here. So that one Called By was actually pretty huge. Like, yeah, I know I talked about like summoning Coritis and using that for multiple disrupt points, and I will of course use it to drop the whale's attack points to 0 when they go to enter battle phase, but that Called By was huge on the Flamberge Dragon, but unfortunately, top decking Branded Regained here is just like the absolute worst. Like, I was like, come on, give me like any monster for this Branded and High Spirits, but nah. I think Branded Regained, if I had to pick out, like, you know, all these cards from my 60 card deck here, this might have actually just been one of, if not the worst possible top deck. Like, I feel like almost anything else would have at least some amount of application, but yeah, there's just really not anything I can do here. I guess I'll drop the whale's attack points and summon Coritis. Or, I mean, battle with Coritis, not summon it. It's like I'll activate Regained, I guess, just in case. But yeah, at this point, I was pretty confident I just wasn't going to win this duel. So it was close, though. We were kind of one top deck away. Like, there was a lot of top decks where that would have gotten us there. Especially because, if you remember our last turn, our opponent used Ash against our Granganol, and then also normaled Veiler to use with original Sinful Spoils. That's another reason to have Super Polyed with the Diabell there, is if I think I'm going to have a follow-up turn, they probably have to normal summon a hand trap that they will then not be able to use on the follow-up turn to make plays with the original Sin, right? So granted, they had an Imperm here, so maybe even top-decking Brain Diffusion might not have been enough to get me there. Certainly top-decking like Oliver wouldn't have been enough to get me there. But if nothing else, I do feel like this game does show how Despia can have a good amount of interaction even when it seems like they don't. Like, one Granganol by itself might kind of seem like, oh, what's Granganol gonna do? But there's a lot it could go into. Especially when you're on the other side of the table and you don't even know if their Granganol's gonna go into Coritis or Proskinian. You kind of have to plan for both. Which makes it a much better disruption tool. I think that's kind of true of Branded Despia in general. Like we saw with that first game, right? Like, hands and certain board states might not look impressive, but what they can result in is often very, very good. So, All right, that's going to go ahead and do it for this video. Thank you everybody so very much for watching. Let us now move to our outro. Hey everybody, thank you so much for watching all the way to the end of the video. That means a lot to me. It's also a great way to support the channel, so thank you very much in that way as well. If you're interested in supporting the channel in other ways, like the very special patrons that I am thanking here, you can do so by checking out some of the links in the description. One of those goes to the Patreon, where you can join these fine folk and support the channel that way. I do post daily content over on Patreon, so you do get something for supporting there. And if you're interested, I also have a coaching tier option as well. Details again will be on Patreon in the link below. Also in the description linked below is my Twitch page where I stream a few times a week. You can go ahead and check that out, follow or subscribe over there if you ever want to catch me live. You'll also find my second YouTube channel if you feel like subscribing over there to watch some of the Twitch VODs as well as some additional non-Yu-Gi-Oh related content that I make over there. Again, any of those links you want to check out is all a great way of supporting. But again, even if you don't do that, just watching was also a fantastic way to support. And once again, I have to thank you so very much. But in any case, this is Hexlex. I'm going to be signing out, and I'm hoping you have a fantastic day.